What's up, everybody? It is I, Tevin El Chapo. Friends call me Chop, and we are back with another episode of Chop Logic. Yes, the show where we get to the logic of things in my very own special Chop way. And we are back with another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time, your efforts, just being here. Be sure, if you haven't already, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more episodes. Make sure you like this video. All the YouTube things, right? We appreciate it here at Chop Logic Podcast. Now, speaking of podcasts, this is a special episode. As a podcast producer myself, not only of this show, but of others as well as a profession, I kind of wanted to speak on this topic specifically because it's something that I've noticed a lot of and something that, I feel like could help a lot of people when it comes to navigating the podcasting space, which is seasonal podcasts, right? So this will be technically a part 2 to my podcasting 101 episode. So if you haven't watched that episode or if you haven't listened to it yet, be sure to check that one out first. It'll give you a lot of good details about starting your podcast. But this is going to dive deeper into once you already have the general logistics of the podcast started, what to do, what not to do when navigating more of a seasonal direction of your podcast, right? So seasonal podcasts can be good in a lot of different ways. For one, you can test the market to see just how you feel about podcasting. For one, you can see how you can navigate the space in terms of growing your audience. For two, just in terms of engagement, hype, things of that nature, different tools and navigations on how to build community through the podcasting space. There's a lot of good things to bring into a seasonal podcast idea, right? However, seasonal podcasts can also be detrimental at the same time. And we're going to just speak on a lot of those different things. So let's get more into just why you would want to do a seasonal podcast. For one, seasonal podcasts are a great way to introduce you to the podcasting space. So if you have no experience in podcasting and you kind of just want to get into the space, you want to try different things out, you want to give yourself the liberties of being able to test different things and not necessarily dedicate your entire life to podcasting like people like me, then creating a seasonal podcast would be great for you, especially if you don't have necessarily the time or the capacity to run a podcast on a consistent basis throughout the year, right? So essentially, what exactly is a seasonal podcast is essentially more or less a set of episodes, kind of like a season of a TV show, right? Now, I want to start by saying this. Podcasting is not the same as a TV show for a variety of different reasons. For one, podcasting is not necessarily as consumable or, I guess, reconsumable than TV shows or movies, right? So you can watch a movie or a TV show multiple times. You can rewatch the episodes multiple times, right? With a podcast, most listeners and most viewers of your podcast, 9 times out of 10, are probably only going to listen at most one full time if they get through the entire episode. So you got to keep those things in mind. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule. So there are plenty of episodes where people may go back to and re-listen to again and again, depending on where they at or depending on what they're doing. I've done that plenty of times with different shows. But for the most part, podcasting is not a space where you can consider it the same as a TV show. And that's something that I hear a lot from a lot of people when they're trying to get into the space and they say they want to do a seasonal podcast. The first things they want to say is essentially they want their podcast to be like a TV show, but TV shows aren't structured the same way. TV shows have a different style of crew. They have writing behind them, different levels of post-production depending on what's needed. It's just so many more moving parts in a TV show. And again, the rewatchability and even the bingeability of a TV show, especially considering how it's more of a visual aesthetic in TV and movies than it is in podcasting specifically, makes it more of a replay value when it comes to those types of things, right? So for instance, you can't compare $1 million worth of game, the podcast, to Stranger Things. Two completely different things. And I love Gillian Wallow, but I can't listen to their episodes 500 times. If I listen to one episode, which is on average maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours long, I'm not going to digest, me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, I'm not going to digest multiple episodes in one sitting. You feel what I'm saying? But in terms of a season of television like Stranger Things, even though I'm gonna say I ain't never finished watching Stranger Things because them episodes just got absurdly too long. All right, maybe that wasn't the best example, but you get the point I'm trying to make, right? you can sit through it. It's more of a visual aesthetic. So you are able to watch it and be more entertained by it versus a podcast, which is more audio. So realistically, it makes more sense to structure a show with more visual elements than it is a podcast. Podcasting gets digested through different platforms, specifically in the audio space. So again, there are places where, let's say you are going on a road trip, or you just have a long drive in general, or if you're cooking, or if you just need something playing in the background, you may play a episode of a podcast you've already listened to, right? But because it's not a visual element as strong as a narrative television show, you can't necessarily structure your podcast in that same way and expect the same results, right? So I hear that a lot of times where people want to say, hey, I want my show to be like a TV show, which sounds good, but realistically, the execution behind that is not as feasible as people think it is. The next thing, realistically, is that because it's not feasible to structure your show like a TV show, most podcasts that are seasonal don't succeed because they're seasonal, right? So if you do 10 episodes of a podcast and then you are looking for growth or traction and things of that nature, you're only doing 10 episodes in a year. That's only like 10 weeks out of a whole 52-week year. Realistically, it's going to take you substantially longer to see any real growth in the space versus somebody who does it on a weekly or even bi-weekly basis throughout the year. So for instance, I'll give you an example of David Shands, right? Shout out to David Shands. He said on multiple occasions that it took him, I think, around 150 episodes, I believe. I'm not too certain on the number, but well over 100 episodes at least to get some real momentum, real traction in his podcast. Now, he's gone off to do a lot of amazing things in the podcasting space since then. But just imagine how long it took him to do that. And the podcast is weekly. So 150 episodes of a weekly podcast, that's like what, 2.5 years, give or take? You know what I mean? Maybe almost 3 full years. And that's every single week. If you're doing a 10 episode season, that's 15 years. 15 years. And that's if you are seeing growth every year, which again makes it harder because it's a podcast and it's not going to be redigested by people who had digested the first time. So it just becomes one of those things where it is so much more difficult for you to succeed in the space because you're limiting yourself in a seasonal podcast, right? Now, I say all that to say that seasonal podcasts can very much still work. I'm not saying that to discredit seasonal podcasts or to tell you not to do a seasonal podcast at all, but I'm just giving you all the ideas and all the things that you need to know within the space, right? So some ways that a seasonal podcast can work is, for one, you have a podcast network. So let's say you started your podcast, right? And you did that as a seasonal thing, right? And then you create a podcast network where as soon as that season ends, you started a whole nother season of a whole different podcast on the exact same YouTube channel or the exact same platform, wherever the case may be in terms of where you're hosting your podcast, right? So at that point, you're not necessarily locked in to that one specific podcast, but you're still podcasting throughout the year on some consistent basis, right? So at that point, it gets kind of tricky where it's like, okay, you can have different seasons of different shows, but especially if you're going to be the talent in front of these different shows, at that point, you could have just might as well kept your original podcast going because you're still going to be podding throughout the year. The next benefit is if you wanted to shop the podcast to sponsors or different partners who can pick it up, right? So if you needed a podcast network in your own right to sponsor the podcast, then shooting a season of the podcast will be able to give you a proof of concept that you can show to these different people, these different investors, and show them whether or not they'd be interested in taking on the totality of the show if it were to get picked up fully. Similar to a TV show in that regard, but the different avenues of how to do that get tricky. For one, you got to understand that once you do something like that, the negotiation process gets really tricky in terms of what ownership looks like. So you may own the show, but where is it going to be hosted at? Is it going to be hosted on somebody else's YouTube channel? Is somebody else going to front the bill in terms of the production value and things of that nature? Is things going to be difficult for you to find monetization? Or is it going to close the door to different sponsorships that you can have because you decide to get into a certain partnership? These are the things you have to consider. But if you have a season of the podcast already, then you are able to at least present it to people in such a way that it's packaged up. Even if it's not perfect, you are able to present it to them so that they could potentially partner with you, which is always great. Now, if they were to partner for you, to be clear, you still have to keep doing the show after that. So it's not like you'll do the 10 and then you'll just be done. Like, no, you'll do the 10 and then you keep going if it gets picked up, And then also another benefit would be just tweaking the podcast. So like I said, you can create it to be seasonal in terms of 10 episodes. But once you get through that 10 episodes, you can take like a real short break, and then come back and do another season, right? So one of the biggest issues I see in terms of seasonal podcasts is that most people who do it, they usually take the rest of the year off and that's it. So you did 10 episodes, 10 weeks, and then you're done until around that same time next year. A whole year goes by. Now, if you're going to do a seasonal podcast, I suggest that if you are going to do a season, take maybe a month off, maybe 2 months, maybe 1 quarter off, maximum 3 months. And then you get right back into it. You feel what I'm saying? You don't want to necessarily pigeonhole yourself by not putting yourself in position to succeed by putting the podcast out consistently, right? So if you want to be in the podcasting space and this is something that you want to do, I understand creating a seasonal podcast from the standpoint of not being sure whether or not you want to stay consistent in the space, which is completely understandable. But once you've come to those conclusions, you should definitely be looking into how can I podcast long term? How can I continue to create this podcast? How can I make sure that this podcast is continuously growing? Your podcast is like your business, which is something I stated in the last episode. And if you're treating your podcast like a business, then you don't want to abandon your business after 10 weeks. Because then it's not a business. It's kind of just like a hobby. Which if you're doing it as a hobby, then honestly, nothing I'm saying in this episode really matters to you. But if you do decide to take your podcast into the next level, you definitely want to consider these things when creating a seasonal podcast. Now, another thing you can do in the seasonal podcasting space is you could be a sports podcaster. Sports podcasts are a little bit different because in sports, of course, sports are in a season. You know what I'm saying? So if you are a podcaster that talks about the NBA or the NFL, and then the NFL season is going on and you're podcasting throughout the season, that's perfect, right? And then you get to the playoffs, you're still talking about it. The Super Bowl, you're still talking about it. But then once the season ends, there's not only but so many things you can really talk about. Now you can talk about free agency, you can talk about the draft, you can still do some episodes here and there, but it being seasonal makes more sense in that type of demographic because even your audience is expecting it to be seasonal because the sport itself is seasonal. So if you're attaching yourself to a seasonal thing, like even if you had a Stranger Things podcast, which, I don't know why. Listen, this is not a shade against Stranger Things. Did y'all know that they making the TV shows dumber because they don't expect y'all to even be watching? That's kind of crazy, right? So if you're watching Stranger Things or any show on Netflix, and this is a complete tangent, by the way, and they get into the same plot beats or they get into regurgitating the same things over and over and over again or telling you verbally what's going on repeatedly, it's because they don't expect you to be looking at the screen as it's going on. They expect you to be on your phone. So that's why shows are getting dumber. But that helps us in the podcasting space, right? Because now it gives people the opportunity to potentially come to our podcast, right? So like I said, in a seasonal situation, if you were even talking about a TV show that's seasonal, right? You can have a episode about the podcast, about each episode of the show itself, right? Like Stranger Things. And then you can kind of talk about the different things, different theories. You can have like different breakdowns. You can have rewatches. You can do however you want to, right? But then again, I still find that to be a little bit more tricky than a sports podcast because again, with sports podcasts, people are anticipating and expecting the next season of the sport to come. You know what I mean? Versus a TV show, now more than ever, especially, TV shows get canceled left, right, and sideways. So you can do a seasonal podcast on a show and then it abruptly gets canceled and then you don't have anything else. So I think that works better if you were on the show. Like I've seen a lot of a lot of people who are formerly on like old sitcoms and whatnot come back for podcasts and they talk about the old show. I think that's perfectly good. But even then, that's not necessarily seasonal because you can branch off and talk about so many things from that point, right? You can bring on actors from the show. I've seen that. You can talk about individual episodes. You can talk about, you can bring people on from the production side, like directors or anything like that. So, I don't think that's a viable way to create it as a seasonal podcast, but it's still something to do. Right. So like I said, sports will probably be another avenue that will be super successful. Right. And then lastly, having the season come out in one place and also just being able to have it in other outlets and other spaces. Right. So, for example, what I mean specifically is, let's say you have 10 episodes of a podcast and then you end up putting it on YouTube or Patreon or wherever the case may be, right? Putting the whole 10 episodes out at one time and then promoting it as if it had came out on a weekly basis. Now that is an idea. Again, I don't think it works for just 10 or so episodes. There are some ways to tweak that in terms of like being more hands-on, which is, that's kind of like podcasting 103, which at that point, let us know if you want that episode or if you want to talk for a free consultation directly, holler at me. But, that's another way that you can kind of get into the seasonal podcasting space. Now, these are just a handful of ideas. These are things I want you to kind of consider when you're creating a seasonal podcast, because these are a lot of the pitfalls of why seasonal podcasts fail. Seasonal podcasts fail because people are taking extra long breaks. People are not considering what it means to grow in the podcasting space or even just the content creation space in general. And also people are not structuring their shows around something seasonal to make it make sense for them to have a seasonal podcast. Or they're not pitching the show in the right places so that they can turn that seasonal podcast into a non-seasonal podcast where it's coming out consistently, right? So my biggest suggestion, if you don't have the capacity to do podcasting long term, is to find what does it mean to put out podcasting at least throughout the year, right? So even if you do 10 episodes and you can put out one episode a month and then you can promote it the entire month by cutting it down into clips, and every other week or every other day, you putting out clips from that same episode until next month, right? Just any way that you can still build momentum or at least stretch it out, in the streets, they call it making the work stretch. But any way that you can stay consistent in the space will be the biggest thing over anything, right? Consistency will be anything else. And a lot of people fail in seasonal podcasts because they're just not being consistent. So those are pretty much all of my thoughts. Like I said, if you want another episode talking more about the different things and pitfalls in podcasting, definitely let me know. We are going to go to break. And when we come back, we got some trivia. This video is sponsored by Chop House Media Group. Now listen, podcasting is hard, all right? There's a lot of moving parts to a successful podcast, whether it be the shooting side, the post-production side, the audio mixing and mastering. Just having the right strategy and know how to even get this podcast in the right places and getting it into the right positions to get monetized. And that is where Chop House Media Group helps out at. We have coined the phrase, the podcast in the box, where we pretty much facilitate anything and everything that you need to run a successful podcast, between the production, the post-production, the strategy and tips and tricks that you need to be 1,000% successful in every single aspect of your podcasting career. Now, if you are interested in being a part of this and making sure that you get your podcast to the next level, whether you are just now starting out your podcast or you are already in the podcasting field but want to take it to another level, be sure to hit the link below and schedule your free consultation with us to make sure that we get your podcast up and going further than you can ever imagine. All right, again, thank you to Chop House Media Group for sponsoring this video. And let's get back to the show. And we're back. All right, so closing the laptop time. You already know what it is. We are here for the trivia section of the show. So to be clear, this is how it works. If you're now here for the first time, I'm going to let you know. I have my producer in the back, Javane. Say what's up to the folks, Javane.
What's up?
He is going to give me 3 trivia questions. Now, here's the thing. If I get 2 out of the 3 questions correct, I'm going home riding off into the sunset. If I get 2 out of 3 incorrect, I got to give a cash prize to you, the audience member. And the only way you can get it is, for 1, you subscribe to the YouTube channel. For 2, you like this video. And then for 3, you comment below your favorite moment from this episode. And then we'll randomly select somebody from the comments. Now, Javane.
Yes, sir.
let's
You know how we do
You know
with these
how we go,
questions. Always a time had with trivia.
it's always interesting, man.
Very interesting.
It's always
So,
a thing. This is what we do it for, man.
for the love of the game.
Apart, man.
For the love of the game.
For the love of the game.
Let me know when you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right. So, question number 1. From a production strategy standpoint, what is the primary structural advantage of a seasonal podcast format? And as usual, I'm going to give you your answer choices and you choose what you think works.
Word.
All right. So A, it eliminates the need for marketing between episodes. B, it allows for batch production and tighter narrative arcs. C, it guarantees higher listener retention. Or D, it reduces platform hosting fees.
What was the question again?
The question is, from a production strategy standpoint, what is the primary structural advantage of a seasonal podcast format?
All right, read the answer again. I'm gonna need that.
All right. So we're looking for an advantage here.
Word.
So A is it eliminates the need for marketing between episodes. B, it allows for batch production and tighter narrative arcs. C, it guarantees higher listener retention. D, it reduces platform hosting fees.
I'm gonna say B, but all of them sound crazy.
You're going to go with B, which is it allows for batch production and tighter narrative arcs.
Yes.
All right. That is correct.
All right, so here's the problem with that. Tighter narrative arcs, I just said,
Yeah.
not a TV show.
Right.
So
Nah.
you kind of, you know what I'm saying? What narrative arc we going on in a podcast? That would be interesting to have a narrative arc through a podcast. But I mean, I don't know how you portray that in a podcast. You feel what I'm saying? Like, to get on a little bit of a tangent, to go on a narrative arc, you essentially start one place and you do essentially almost like a 180 of like being in a completely different space by the end. So let's say if we start this podcast and I'm like, I don't know nothing about video production, and then 10 episodes deep, I'm like, I know everything about it. That would be technically a narrative arc. But again, how would I portray that in a podcast? Like me learning for the first 5 or 6 episodes and then me regurgitating the last 4? I don't know. That's me guessing. So that's, I don't know. That's tricky. But
That could be some.
Could be. I mean, if
Could
you look, if you can find a way to work it,
Go for it.
go crazy.
Go stupid.
I never seen it.
All right. Well, you one up right now. Bam. You ready for number 2?
Let's do it.
All right. Number 2, from an audience psychology perspective, what does a seasonal break often create when executed well? A, algorithm suppression. B, reduce brand loyalty. C, anticipation and event style return momentum. Or D, lower ad CPM, which is per.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna say C, but again, now also that's a crazy one. So I'm gonna say C.
C.
Yeah.
Final answer is C. Correct.
Yeah.
I think you touched on that in the episode. So
Word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what. Yeah.
see, this is why they think you be cheating,
I really don't.
because you be seeing the future. You know, when you gotta like
I'm
that.
very clairvoyant. You feel what I'm saying?
I mean,
People say it's because I'm a Pisces. I don't know how that correlates, but word.
the star people,
I don't know.
astrology.
Fish go with the flow, maybe.
I don't know.
Be like water. Bruce Lee.
Whatever reason it is.
No,
Hey man. All right. Cool. All right. So moving on to number 3, which unfortunately y'all are not getting no money. He 2 up right now, but we'll see if you get 3 for 3. Number 3, which audience behavior pattern presents the greatest challenge for seasonal podcasts? A, episode skipping within a season. B, listener migration to competing shows during hiatus. C, low initial launch downloads. Okay. D, decreased social media engagement mid-season. So again, which audience behavior patterns presents the greatest challenge for seasonal podcasts?
All of them, honestly.
All right, which one most?
Read them again.
Episode skipping within the season. Listener migration to competing shows during your hiatus. C, low initial launch downloads. Or D, decreased social media engagement mid-season.
I'm going to say B, final answer.
B, final answer, which is listener migration to competing shows during hiatus. That is correct. That is correct.
Word.
So he 3 for 3.
So all those things are reasons to not do a seasonal podcast. All
Right.
I spoke on all the reasons that it could work, but again, everything that I said in this episode, at least 99% of all the seasonal podcasts don't do none of them. I just want to be clear. Everybody think we can do 10 episodes, we're gonna go crazy, and then we're gonna come back next year. I'll see you next fall. You know what I'm saying? Like, nah, it don't work like that. You feel me? Like, imagine doing any type of content creation in the space and you not consistent. You're not doing it on a regular basis. Even this podcast is bi-weekly. You feel what I'm saying? So it's like, it's not weekly, but it's coming out every month. You feel what I'm saying? Twice a month, you're going to get a new episode. You're going to get clips from the episodes. You're going to get it on all platforms. You feel what I'm saying? And it's like, that's because of my capacity, because I got to produce podcasts for other people. You dig what I'm saying? I got other things that I got to do. So that's why it's like, it's easier for me to do this on a bi-weekly basis. Now, in terms of a seasonal podcast for 10 episodes, what do you expect to happen between episode 10 of season 1 and episode 1 of season 2? You feel what I'm saying? Do you expect that people are still going to care? You feel what I'm saying? Now, another thing I didn't speak on is that you could be LeBron James, who does a seasonal podcast on his downtime, and I'm sure you'll get all the traction in the world. That's another way to succeed in seasonal podcasting. Be LeBron James. Be somebody
you got to be
Barack
LeBron.
Obama. Be
LeBron
somebody
James.
crazy. You know what I'm saying? Be somebody, Beyonce. Be Beyonce. Be A$AP Rocky. Be Rihanna. Be Kendrick Lamar. Be one of these people that no matter when you decide to do your podcast, people are going to tap in regardless. Because if you somebody like that with millions of followers, then you can do whatever you want to do. So this whole episode don't apply to you.
Literally.
For real. So
speaking from experience too, I mean, I feel like the people that have been around watching this podcast long enough know that the first time we did this was seasonal.
Well, yeah, we didn't talk about that. Yeah.
Oh, all right. We gonna take that part out. All right.
Word. This started. Yeah. So I'm speaking from experience for sure. So Jermaine knows we did 10 episodes of this show and we was gone for 2 years. All right. So we was gone forever.
I ain't say all that.
We was gone forever. You feel what I'm saying? So it's just kind of like. That's another reason why I'm like, I'm not just talking to be talking. I understand the problems of a seasonal podcast because all the things that I did then is the same things everybody else be doing, all the same things everybody else be saying. Oh, I want this to be like a TV show. I just want to do like a season and then I want to come back next year and everything is going to be fine. That's another thing. You don't know what the future holds. All right. So you can say, oh yeah, we'll be back next year. Nigga, that's what I said. 2 years later, we still wasn't doing shit. All right. So it's like, come on, man. Like, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. Find a way that this is something you serious about doing, that you can do it consistently. Like I said, bare minimum, drop an episode once a month. If you can do 10, you can do 12. That's 12 episodes. And then if you got clips, you can make like what? 5, 6, 7 clips, depending on how long the episode is. Then it's like, okay, you could at least drop a clip a week until the next one. You feel me? Like, it ain't perfect at all, but it's something. It's better than nothing. Because like I said, I was like that. I was nothing. I bought all the equipment. Now, let's get into it.
Nah, go ahead.
I bought all the equipment to do my own podcast. This whole setup that you're seeing right now, the setup that I use to produce podcasts for other people, I bought it for me first. All right. This was for my stuff, not for anybody else's. I didn't care to make no money off of podcasting. I did it strictly because I wanted to be a podcaster. And then I bought the gear. First of all, it was hell to even go through it because I got sick immediately after I bought the gear. I was in and out the hospital for a very long time, even before we started shooting. We shot the first episode in my living room. I literally was out the hospital the day before. Literally. And went right back maybe 2-3 days after that. You feel what I'm saying? So it took us a long time to get 10 episodes shot. And then I had to edit it. So it took even longer to get it edited. Then I had to do promo videos for it. You feel what I'm saying? So it was just like this whole situation. By the time we got to the point of dropping the episodes, and then I don't even know if Javane noticed. We had folks that was mad at their episodes. People who didn't even want to be people who didn't know they was gonna be on the show, even though I told them they was gonna be on the show. So now the episode's coming out. I'm getting calls like, hey, I didn't know you was going to do this. I didn't know you was going to do that. I want you to take this shit down. I'm like, damn.
Damn.
You feel what I'm saying? And again, we did 10 episodes thinking, okay, cool. And that was not even including how hard it was to even get people on the show in the first place. Because especially when you first starting out, you're going to do a seasonal podcast. Niggas don't know what the fuck the podcast is going to look like. They don't know nothing about what it's going to look like for real. So it's like even me trying to convince people who ain't never been on a podcast before, to be on my show. You know how hard it is even today to get people on the show? And I got more than enough episodes out that could at least show them what it's going to be. Imagine back then when we ain't had nothing. We was getting the process of getting the season together. We did the 10 episodes. It was edited, put out the 10th episode. 2 years gone. Over with. So again, I'm not talking like, oh, I just hate seasonal podcasts, but I'm not LeBron James. So when I did seasonal podcasts for 10 episodes and I disappeared for 2 years, not because I wanted to, but because life just lifed that way. And I came back, I had to start over. And you will too. That's why we're here today. So yeah, that's all I got. I just want to make sure we on the same page, because I don't want nobody thinking I'm just talking down on what they got going on. Because I know a lot of people probably need to watch. I need to send this to some people. I know some people personally doing their seasonal podcast. I ain't seen an episode yet. Talking about, oh yeah, thank you for watching season 2 of my shit. Well, guess what? Season 3 ain't never came out. Now has it? Shout out to you though. Shout out to all of y'all. It's not just one person. There's a bunch of y'all doing that, man. That's why I'm saying, like I said, if you're going to do a short break. You do a month off, you right back to it. Season 2, season 1 ended in February. Season 2 starts in April. You know what I'm saying? Like, season 1 stops in February. Season 2 come back February next year. And you wondering why you ain't getting no growth, why niggas don't care, why you don't even look like you care no more. You feel what I'm saying? And again, I understand life be life in that way and you got to pause it regardless, because even if it's not seasonal, you can possibly just end up having to pause the whole thing. You feel me? It just happens that way. I've had plenty of clients fall off because of that. Life just kind of life's that way. Business kind of takes off in a different direction. You end up being successful in other things. You end up having personal devastations. I done went through it all. I done went through all of it. You feel what I'm saying? Like, so it's just kind of like, it makes sense, but at the same time, like, if you really want to do this and you have the capacity to do it, do it. No matter how you need to restructure, retool, however you see fit to make it work, you'll make it work. You'll make time for something you for real about, no matter what it is. We shot this podcast on my birthday. You feel what I'm saying? So you don't tell me nothing about you not having time. All right, that's enough of that. We can get out of here. All right, thank you, Jermaine. Appreciate that. Thank you for being on the show. I went on a mean tangent. We're gonna clip that. We're gonna have to clip that whole thing. We'll find a way to clip around it. Right. If you learned anything from this episode, definitely comment below, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more episodes like this. Again, thank you so much for being here. My name is Tevin El Chapo. Friends call me Chop, and we out of here. Peace.